Hi, my name is Ben Hedges and I'm a SharePoint developer and instructor for Point 8020. In this video I will demonstrate how to create and debug a sequential workflow for SharePoint 2010 using Visual Studio 2010. SharePoint includes workflow functionality based on Windows Workflow Foundation. There are two types of workflow templates available to developers in SharePoint 2010. One for creating sequential workflows and one for creating state machine workflows. In this video, I will show you how to create a sequential SharePoint workflow. Before I start building the workflow, I will open SharePoint and show you a document library that I have created that the workflow will be associated with. This is a standard document library called Project. I will review the library settings to show you the configuration of the library. As you can see, it has three columns added to the library. These would be used to support a simple workflow. They are an assignee column, a review comments column, and more importantly for this demonstration, a document status column. This is a choice column and there are three choice values that can be specified on a document when it is edited. Review needed, changes requested, and review complete. Of these, review complete is the critical one that I will watch out for in code. I will check the value in this column, and if the value is review complete, I will finish the workflow. Now let me start Visual Studio 2010 and create the workflow. I'll create a new project in Visual Studio, and for this example I'll expand the install templates and click Visual Basic, and then locate the SharePoint 2010 templates. I will select a project type of sequential workflow, and then provide a name for the project. As you can see, I can only choose to deploy this workflow as a farm solution. I will leave the default name for the workflow and ensure the workflow is a list type. Now I get to select the list that I want to associate this workflow with. I will click the first drop down, and from the selection of lists and libraries I will click the project library. I also have an opportunity to specify the list for history items and the task list that should be used to store tasks that are created in the workflow. I then get to choose how the workflow will be started, either manually by users, automatically when an item is created, or automatically when an item is changed. I will leave the default values and click Finish. On the workflow design surface I have a start item, an on workflow activated activity, and I have a finish item. I'm going to create a simple workflow that monitors the value of the document status field to determine whether the workflow should continue or be considered complete. The first thing I need to do is generate an event handler for the on workflow activated activity, and I do that by setting the invoked property and press enter. For now I will go back to my design surface. I will view the toolbox to add an activity to my workflow. Under the Windows Workflow 3 section I need a while activity, so I'll take that and drop it under the on workflow activated activity. I will then select it, and I want to create a code condition to determine if this workflow has completed. I will click Code Condition, and then I can expand the Code Condition property and enter my code condition. Again, I will generate a procedure. I will call it isWorkflowPending, and Visual Studio generates the isWorkflowPending procedure for me. I also need an on workflow item changed activity, so I will get that and drop it in my while activity. I need to set a few things for this activity. I need to set the correlation token to my workflow token. I also need to generate an event handler, and I'm going to create one called onWorkflowItemChanged. I have now created all of the event handlers I need for my workflow, so I'll add code to the project. I'm going to create a class level variable that will be used to determine if the code should remain in the loop. This is the isWorkflowPending variable, and I will set that to true. The next thing I will add is a procedure that will determine if the workflow should remain pending. I will call it checkStatus, and I will look at the value for the document status in my workflow item, and I will check to see if it is equal to review complete. I get to that using the workflow properties object, which is where properties for the specific instance of the workflow are stored. This includes properties for the document library, the item, and so on. If the values match, I will change the value of my workflow pending variable to false. All that I now need to do is in the on workflow activated and the on workflow item changed, I will call checkStatus. For the isWorkflowPending, I will return the current value of my isWorkflowPending variable and set it to e.result. I have now finished with the code. With the tight integration between Visual Studio and SharePoint, I can now deploy the workflow. I can even add a breakpoint to my workflow and debug from Visual Studio. I will breakpoint the onWorkflowActivated procedure and deploy with debugging. My workflow is deployed and debugging is prepared for me. Let me show the workflow associated with the project library. Now I'll go ahead and upload a document to the library. And as you can see, the Visual Studio breakpoint is hit. From here, I can step through the code. I will press F5 and let the workflow continue. If I want to complete this workflow, I will edit the properties of the document status and set the value to Review Complete. And you can see the workflow status has changed to completed, and this instance of the workflow has finished.